discovery times 0 equals no breakthrough. And sometimes we just sit back in the cathartic experience that we think making a discovery is having a breakthrough. And I'm going to boldly say it is not. It's just purely a discovery. And it's up to you whether you want to take that discovery, act on it, and make a breakthrough.
Welcome to Vibecast, the podcast that dives deep into the heartbeat of workplace culture. I'm your host, Kristi Skutvik. Join me in conversations with extraordinary leaders as we unravel their experiences, both positive and negative, that have impacted workplace culture. This podcast is more than storytelling. It's about actionable insights. Are you ready to transform the vibe at your workplace? Let's go. Today, I had some fun speaking with Curtis Carnes. He has spent over 10 years coaching leaders to make trajectory-shifting breakthroughs in their life and work. His coaching has helped uncover the 5 shifts necessary to make breakthroughs in everyday part of life and work. Curtis shares the process to do this in his book, Breakthroughs Are Everywhere, and he shares some of the simplest tactics during our conversation. I can't wait for you to hear more. All right, Curtis. Well, I am so happy to have you here. I'm excited to talk to you and hear stories from you. And I'm also grateful for a previous podcast guest and somebody I would now call, a friend, Steve Perkins, who I spoke with not too long ago, but he had amazing things to say about you. And I'm really excited to get our conversation going. So as I do with each guest, I just like to hear from you how you describe a vibe. Like, what does that mean to you?
Well, Kristi, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. For me, a vibe is just the strong belief that you can, or the strong belief that we can. And I think different cultures, whether good or bad, either supports that belief or hinders it. And I think there's a host of incredible things that can happen or terrible things that can happen depending on which way you go.
Yeah, I love that belief, right? Because beliefs drive behaviors. And that's been kind of a reoccurring conversation in my life lately around leadership development and with some of my clients of like, what are those behaviors that you're looking to change? But if you don't have the belief, the strong belief behind it, the behaviors could be incongruent, right? Or hard to change because that belief kind of stands as the foundation. I love that. Love that.
Yeah, I was at a conference, I think last year, someone asked me, "Hey, Curtis, like, what's a common theme for your coaching clients?" Never had that question before. And I sat for like 30 seconds. And I said, honestly, self-belief. Because if you can get that, man, you could do anything. And sadly, there's cultures that help generate self-belief, and then cultures that do not. So that's what I care about, is help generating that.
Yeah, gosh, that is true because it starts with you, right? Until you know you can't help others as a leader. Like you have to be aligned with like who your authentic self is and what your beliefs are. And I think so often we just jump into tactics of like, do this as leader, do that as leader. And they're like, I don't even know who I am. How do I know how to authentically do something with somebody else, right? So crazy. That's great. Well, that's a good segue. So I want you to tell me a bit about your personal journey and how you've had an experience, whether good or bad, that created a vibe, how that impacted the organization or the team or the dynamics. Like, I just want you to share, some stories. So I'll hand it over to you and you pick the ones you want, but I want to hear from you.
Well, I got bad stories, I got good stories. So we're gonna do both, okay? Well, I'm an executive coach. I've been that for a while. I was part-time for over 13 years. And 3.5 years ago, I made the jump into the full-time executive coaching. And it really spawned off of a lot of things that happened in 2016 for me. And in that year, I was betrayed by a friend who brought me into an organization. I found my footing. I felt like I was rising in the organization. And the next time I knew it, I was in the CEO's office getting ripped to shreds. Well, my friend, who was a COO of the organization, silently sat beside him. Like, I mean, absolutely shredded in this office. And I actually looked over to this person and said, "Hey, you know that this isn't true." And I said, "Nick, you could vouch for me." Nothing. Absolute silence. And I wasn't the first person. This happened to many people, like in this culture. Like it was a very controlling culture, very toxic. And it's a revolving door. You're in HR, right? That's your past history. Like, probably a culture is toxic if it's a revolving door. But I honestly don't even want to talk about that culture. We've all experienced terrible cultures. I want to talk about the decision that I had to make next. And it's funny, I'm not talking about the decision in 2016. I'm talking about a decision that took me till 2021 to say I had to let go of that experience. And like that experience left me disoriented. We spent a good deal of time in each other's homes. She brought me in the organization. And, we had conversations over the next 4 years about, she actually apologized and came to the point where it said, "I intentionally hurt you for my own professional gain."
Oh my goodness. And imagine how much that happens. I mean, that to me is like a belief within a leader of themselves, right? Of what they have to do based on the environment and energy and vibe that's created at a company. And that is so destructive. That's wild.
Yeah. And we've all experienced bad vibes. You have, I have, people listening have experienced bad vibes. And my thought I want to talk about is, what do you do after? Because my biggest fear is that people are losing twice. Like I was losing twice. I lost in the CEO's office that day, and then I lost again when I let distrust shape how I approached relationships, resources, and opportunities. And I couldn't even tell you I was actually doing that. Like now looking back, I look back just over the 5 years from 16 to 21, how I was a very trusting person, but I wasn't in that season. And that actually kept me out of opportunities. I think I was acting sideways in relationships. I think that had a scarcity mindset when it came to resources. And I remember the day I finally let it go like it was yesterday. It was 5 a.m. Sunday morning. I was sitting in a recliner, feeling all the weight of not letting go. I wrote a 5-page letter addressed to no one, poured out everything. I finally let it go.
Wow. What was like the trigger that morning where you were like, I have to let this go because it's getting in my way? Like, what was the self realization you had?
I mean, I just saw how it was negatively affecting my current role that wasn't even there, right? It was negatively affecting my current role because we eventually leave the toxic environments. But the problem is we're still affected by them in the next place, right? And then I was seeing all the ways I was just affected by it in the next place I landed. And I knew, like, if I'm going to move forward, I have to let this go. And the unique thing is that when I did was actually the same year I went full time in my executive coaching practice. I said, I'm not going to do part time anymore. I'm jumping out of the plane. I'm going full time. And I don't think it's a coincidence, because I think when you let go of bad vibe experiences, it gives you the opportunity to lean in to new experiences, new vibes, and actually creating a new vibe for yourself. Because I think that's where it starts.
Gosh, I love that. And you know what? That's something that I haven't explored with the folks that I've been talking to yet of like this transition period, right? Because that's truly what it is. Is like you can't just like jump and be like, "Oh, it's all good all the time." And like I'm just going to, forget about the past because the experiences that we have, we live with them until we recognize the impact that they've had and what we're going to do about that. They shape who we are for good or for bad, right? The experiences are part of who we become in the future. So I love that. And writing out all the feels, if you will, of what that experience created for you. So you can kind of open your mind and your heart, if you will, to the better opportunity that was probably sitting in front of you for quite a while, it sounds like, but you just couldn't see it because you were stuck.
When you're stuck in the past, when you're stuck in the past failure, a limiting belief, a false narrative you're telling yourself, if you're stuck in any of those, it's hard to move forward and find that thing that you know is gonna make you alive and fully alive. And I had to let go so I can move forward. And man, it made all the difference.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you do this with some of your coaching clients and maybe a story of a turnaround situation, right? Where somebody was stuck in an old story in their head or a belief about themselves and kind of how you coach them out of it and what impact that had.
Yeah, I would be happy to. I'm going to start with the end. And this is an exact quote from this person. Okay. I'm going to read it. And I quote, I'm a different person. I often wonder who is this new Sue? Others are noticing too. People I work with approach me and say, who are you? I would not be the leader I am today without these breakthroughs. But I found my voice. I believe my thoughts matter and need to be heard. I found courage. I'm courageous. I'm brave. The courage extended in my marriage and relationships. Surrendered my fears. I've strengthened my identity. I feel like I've entered a new season, both personally and professionally. I don't have it all figured out. But when I started this journey, I was wearing a backpack full of rocks, but I flung all those rocks out of my backpack. So this person named Sue, she's probably VP in the organization, and she was a self-described people pleaser. I don't know if anybody out there kind of connect with that, people pleaser. Like it kept her up at night. You know, she would let what people say or don't say affect her mood, actions, and her self-worth. And her thoughts, emotions, and actions were often a reaction to what people said about her. She was over the moon when people said positive things. And when they were critical, man, she couldn't fall asleep that night. We played it over and over in her head, and it just affected everything. And she made a discovery in our coaching relationship. Because one of her goals is she wanted to become a strategic visionary leader. She was able to accomplish a lot of things, but she wanted to go from being someone who gets things done to someone who leads other people who gets things done. And then that's a big shift. I'm like, what do you need to do that? She's like, I need to hand off training to another director. I need to let Bob handle our store launches. I need to let someone else handle the facility stuff. And then she paused and said this, I need to let go of trying to prove that I'm enough. And really could divide our coaching relationship in two parts before and after that sentence. And she started delegating more. She started taking courageous action. Um, she's now on the executive team for a company. She's willing to say the hard things that she was always afraid to say before. Like she's recently joined the board of an international company because they want what she has, and she is finally ready to stand up and be counted. So just this really cool thing that she experienced just over the course of our coaching relationship, where she cast off certain ways of viewing herself and took on new ways.
And would you say, I mean, because that, like in theory, and when you hear kind of the end story, it sounds like, wow, yeah, that seems so simple, yet it's really hard to like unwind old beliefs about yourself, or, especially if you've had a negative experience like you did, right? Sitting in that CEO's office, you're like, that's going to happen again. Like you don't just like delete that. It's not something you can just like press the delete button on. So I wonder, is there baby steps to build the confidence and the belief along the way? So you like try it a little bit and then you try it a little bit more. And as those things become successful, then you have like the building blocks of that confidence in order to do it in international boardrooms.
100%. I mean, I think there's something underneath the iceberg that needs to happen and above. So underneath, I talk about in chapter 4 of my book, Breakthroughs Are Everywhere. I talk about 5 shifts that we all need to experience to have breakthroughs every day. And one of them is going from disconnected to connected. And I'm not talking about my relationship with someone else like you, Kristi. I'm talking about my relationship to myself. And I argue in that chapter that there's 3 identity myths that the world tells us. I am what I do. I am what people say, and I am what I have. Guess what? I still get stuck in these, Kristi.
And you wrote the book on it.
Yeah. I get stuck on these.
Yeah. I think that's important to note, though, right? Because it's so easy with social media and when you read a book and when you're sitting on the outside looking in to somebody who, practices these things. That is a great point to say, I don't have it all figured out every day. Some days are better than others. Some situations are better than others, but I still get stuck. I think the key to that is how you get unstuck and how long you let yourself sit in that wallow of stuckness.
100%. And one more comment on the below the iceberg, and I'll give you a very simple tool that just get unstuck in the area. Because we need to cast off those identity myths, right? And it's tough. But once we do, we get the opportunity to do something that changes everything, which is embrace your self-worth. Man, I can't argue for how important that is. It's probably the most important thing you could possibly do in your life. Because if you do, then guess what? You have an opportunity to bring a lot of good vibes into your culture, right? What you do when you experience bad vibes, you don't take it as an attack on your self-worth. We could go on the rest of the podcast on that point there. It's so important.
And you know what I also love about this too? And maybe we can talk a little bit more about the impact personally, right? So I think there's so often people think they can walk through the proverbial, office doors, whatever that looks like today, because I know that takes on many different shapes and forms with remote work and offices looking a little bit different. But people think I can separate. In fact, I just had a conversation with a new leader the other day. I can separate, and I've been conditioned and told I should separate my personal life from my professional life. And I probably would argue that point until I'm blue in the face that that's impossible. People try to do it, but how you're feeling personally leaks out professionally, and how you're feeling professionally leaks out personally. And I've had many moments where my kids who, they say it like it's like they're feeling it, have told me that, gosh, mom, you always are upset when you get off that call or when you're talking to that person or I just you're always upset. And that for me was a light bulb probably about 4 years ago when one of my kids said that to me, and I'm like, he's right. He is absolutely right. My professional life is leaking into my personal life. My kids are picking up on it. And the vibe they're getting is that she's always upset. I'm not even upset at them. I'm just upset, right? It's just like an energy I'm giving off about how I'm feeling. So I think like the work that you're doing is amazing because embracing your self worth is more than just who you are as an executive. It's more than who you are at the company you work at, but it's how you feel about yourself personally and professionally, and just the impact you can have on people in general seems, kind of groundbreaking.
Yeah, I mean, those people are a pleasure to be around. Don't you love people being around people that have already embraced their self-worth? Oh man, it's a dream. Like I had another coaching relationship with someone, VP over entire risk management, and she feels like she finally did that for the first time. And she's seeing all the ramifications of it just in all of her direct report relationships. Because when you embrace yours, it gives other people permission to embrace theirs. And that's everything.
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be spoken, right? Like the way it shows up is really in how they approach work, how they approach their team, how they approach decision making and delegation, like you were sharing, right? It's like it just shows up in the behaviors, but it's grounded in a belief.
Yes, 100%. Well, I was thinking of your kid's story when you said Man, mom, you're always angry. Like that's a perfect lead into this tool that it's called the breakthrough circle. Like this is the tool that I'm convinced you get breakthroughs every day in your life if you use. And it's unnervingly simple. When something's simple, then we can't hide behind complexity for not doing it. And that's a scary thought. So breakthrough is this: discovery times action equals breakthrough, period. You make a discovery, you take a courageous action, you have a breakthrough. And the greater the discovery, the greater the action, the greater the breakthrough in your life. And I just want to guide you and the listener just around this tool called the breakthrough circle. And it's in my book, Breakthroughs Are Everywhere. You can see it on my website as well. But there's 3 steps for making a discovery and 3 steps for action. And it all starts with one thing: an inflection point. An inflection point is at the top of the circle, and it's simply defined as a moment in time where change may occur. And the keywords may, Kristi, may occur. Like an inflection point was delivered to you by your son, right? You're always angry. When I get off the call with those people, you're not angry all the time, Kristi. I'm
Yeah.
giving you a flag. You're only
Well,
angry with certain people.
exactly, exactly.
But you noticed it, and you get an opportunity right there. Okay, are you going to do something with that or not? And we have moments professionally and personally all the time. They're happening all the time. I've probably experienced 17 inflection points today. Step 1 is observe. And I'm convinced that the number one reason we're not having discoveries and making breakthroughs is that we're not looking for them.
That requires people to be present, right? And I think so often we're running. I do this. I am guilty, and I know when I'm doing it, and it's hard to get out of the mode, but I'm thinking about all the other things and not just like being present in the moment to even be open to observe it.
There's a host of reasons why we're like that, both culturally and just as individuals. But we got to begin observing. We got to begin setting aside time where we make observations about our personal and professional life. And that could happen in a host of different ways. That could be journaling. That could be a regular conversation you have with a significant other. That could be a coach. There's so many ways that you can begin to observe. So that's step 1, just observing it, noticing these moments. Step 2 is reflect, because often we kind of notice the moment and then we get busy and we leave. We leave that spot and we never reflect on like, why was that important to me? What was behind why my son said that to me? How do I want to show up in my home? Right? There's so many questions you could ask yourself, and I'm guessing you did because you're an awesome person, that you could ask yourself to reflect on these moments. And then the third step is discuss. And I'm going to tell you why I think this is so important. Probably only in the last 13 years have I invited people into my interior world. And most people don't. I'll be honest. We don't want to invite people in because to show who we really are. And I can't tell you how many times I've had a coaching relationship, someone say, I've never told this to anyone. They're not confessing embezzlement schemes. They're not confessing affairs. Like they're saying, this is what I want to do with my life. Like, this is the impact I want to make. This is the person I want to be. And for some reason, we don't say those things out loud.
It's so wild, right? I was in a facilitating a leadership roundtable, and we had just come off the heels of a very good conversation. And one of the executive leaders in the room said, I'm embarrassed. And we said, tell me more. And he said, I'm embarrassed that I didn't think of these things already. And that is like a self-realization, right? And prompts discussion. And it was so profound because he was showing up as himself with his thoughts and in his vulnerability of embarrassment. It was wild and it was so good. It was such a breakthrough.
100%. And it could be like, it's embarrassment, shame, fear, but it'd also be like, this is what I want to do with my life. This is my dream. I want to take this, my division here. Like I want to be the next CEO. Like there's so many things we could say. Like I was in a coaching relationship with one person. He just said, I want to be a 2-day CEO. That's what I want. And I'm afraid that I can't do that because like it just involved too many shifts I would need to make in my life. And just saying that dream out loud was big. He's never really self-articulated that out loud to someone, and then began the coaching journey, right? And moving in that direction. And it's really cool to see where he's ended up. So that's discovery. Observe, reflect, discuss. You're bringing people in, but often we drop the baton there, right? I don't know about you, Kristi. I feel really good about myself when I'm discussing my discoveries with other people. It makes me feel like I'm awesome. Maybe people are nodding their head and be like, yeah, Curtis, that's something special there. But the thing is, discovery times 0 equals no breakthrough. And sometimes we just sit back in the cathartic experience that we think making a discovery is having a breakthrough. And I'm going to boldly say it is not. It's just purely a discovery. And it's up to you whether you want to take that discovery, act on it, and make a breakthrough. So step 1, just plan. What's the first step? And that's a simple question. 2 other of my favorite questions is just, what's your best imagined future a year from now? Like, a lot of us are just worst case scenario people. Like, how can we create best case scenarios? Even within our organ, not even just in our individual lives, but even the teams and organizations we lead. Like, what would create better vibes? What's the worst thing that could possibly happen? Or what's the best possible imagined future in this organization? What's a better chance of creating good vibes?
Instead of just sitting in like, ugh, the culture sucks. Okay, cool. The culture sucks. So now what?
We agree with you.
Yeah. Nobody's arguing your point.
But what discoveries are you making about the culture, about yourself, your involvement in the culture, the way you pull back, right? There's so many discoveries you can make, but then you start making the plan. What's that first step? And one of my other favorite questions is, if you're full of courage, what would you do? It's the answer to that question that I wrote this book for me last year. I was in a group coaching experience with Stephen Perkins. It was a breakthrough group. And it's funny, I was answering my own intake questions, which I don't do. It was the first time I ever did. For a coach forever, first time I answered my own intake questions.
Oh, wow. That's a breakthrough right there.
Breakthrough moment. And it was, if you're full of courage, what'd you do? I said, I would write this book. So that's what I did. I encourage other people. I love that question because it guides you in the right direction. When it comes like, man, the vibes at your culture, the vibes in your family, the vibes in your marriage. That if you're full of courage, what would you do?
Because that's where you kind of remove fear, right? And so once you remove fear and you're not living in this scarcity mentality, you can live in abundance and you can have courage, and like the possibilities are really endless. It's just removing that barrier, which is big and bold in people's lives.
Yes, it's big and bold. And we could do a whole other podcast just on that, but we won't. But
Never say never, Curtis.
yeah, the first step is plan. The next step of action is account. And I'm just going to give everyone the silver bullet. The on the silver platter, I'm going to deliver it to you, Kristi, to the listener. The best question to create like real movement with accountability is, what question do you want me to ask you the next time we meet? It's a silver bullet question. Like, it gets the other person to set the accountability metric. It gets them to tell you the question that they want to be asked the next time you connect. So it removes the discomfort of following up, of accountability. So say someone had a bold step they wanted to take to shift the vibe of their work culture. They told me what that step was. I would say to them, now, what question do you want me to ask you about that the next time we meet? Usually some people would be like, if they're newer to my process, they'd be like, just ask me if I did it. I'll say, no, I'm going to assume you did it. I'm going to ask you, how about, and they give me another question. They say, well, what happened in our culture when I did? Now that is an accountability question. So I follow up with that, and it's just cool to see where people go. So we got plan, account. The last step is act. Like, I know it sounds so simple, Kristi, but it's the time that you actually do it. Like, whatever it is. And this is where breakthroughs occur. Like, this is where you say, man, I'm coming off those calls differently next time, and I do. Right? Like,
With a smile on my face. I'm just going to smile because sometimes it changes everything.
yeah, it's like, and there's so many things where I've seen people actually do it, like negotiate that salary, pitch that job, become a 2-day CEO. There's so many things that people have done because they did it. And for me, that's where it is. It's breakthroughs can occur in you, your work culture, your family culture, if you commit to a process of making discovery and taking action.
And the cool thing is once leaders start to do this, right? Because what I'm seeing in workplaces, and really I think what's impacting the vibe the most, is that leadership has shifted. I wouldn't say all these organizations had amazing leadership pre-COVID, but I would say the dynamics of the workplace and the shifts really shed a light on what leadership is and how it I guess should be. I don't like to should too often, but what some of the things that are super duper important that just kind of happened by being in the same office together, having conversations. I don't know. Now we have all these accidental leaders, I would say, that were great individual contributors. And they're like, what the heck am I doing? And so much out there is about, you know, creating a behavior. But again, going back to the very beginning of this conversation, is like shifting that belief in yourself and then going through this process and helping then your team go through this process. Because it's not just a leadership skill. Now, the leadership will help define the vibe and the culture, even if it's a subculture within a department. But then impacting the people on your team who might be individual contributors that can take it back to their whatever they lead. Everybody's a leader in some way, shape, or form, whether they lead something in their personal life, whether they coach a team of their kids, whether, they're part of a small group, whatever they are, there's leadership skills that are needed. And just like the belief and the courage in yourself is just paramount.
100%. That's where it's all at. I hope we could all kind of get to that level. I want to get to that level, Kristi.
Me too.
So I'm just crushing everything I do with confidence, and that would be great.
Yeah, yeah. And I would say, like, life gets in the way, and that is something that's real for everybody, but don't let that define the rest of your life. It's like, let that be a defining moment to do something about it, right? So some days are going to suck and some days are going to be awesome. And to your point, be present enough to observe what's happening and do something about it. So I just love that so, so much. Okay. So these stories are amazing because I think there's going to, people can relate to these situations and know that, again, just writing a book doesn't make you perfect at this thing. It's an ongoing evolution, iteration of who you're becoming. So, what would you say? You've given us a ton of like little nuggets of goodness, I would say. But if there's one thing that you could pull this down to, maybe the tactical secret sauce to maintain positive work vibes for a healthy and productive team culture, team leadership, whatever that may be, what would you kind of say is the secret sauce, the one thing? Go do this now.
Here it is. This is me. You may say differently. Other people may say differently. Is good vibes start with you. You have a choice. You can have good vibes independent of the vibes around you. And that's difficult. It comes from my favorite leadership book of all time. You're going to curse my name if anyone actually reads it, because it's like swimming through the mud. It's called Failure of Nerve by Edwin Friedman. It's just the number one thing you could do as a leader is be a non-anxious presence. The number one. And to use your vernacular, the number one thing you could be as a leader is have a good vibe. Like a good vibe that you're centered, you're settled. This is who I am. This is what I want to do. Because if you have that confidence, that security, that self-worth inside you, you don't have the acting ways. You don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to justify yourself. right? You don't need to treat people certain ways to make you feel better. Like there's so many ways you don't have to act anymore. It's all those ways that create a crappy work culture, right? Like, so if you're able to have a good vibe inside yourself, you will de facto, especially if you're the leader of the organization, create a great vibe.
It's almost like that, the term, and I tell my kids this a lot, is like, you don't have to wait for somebody, you go first. As a leader, you go first. Don't wait for somebody else to start doing it and be just like a byproduct of that. You go first in creating that vibe and being that confident, courageous leader and creating the team that's, going to do amazing things because of the energy that lies within it. You go first.
And when we do, it gives other people permission to do so. I can't stress that enough. Like if you could do it, others can, especially if you're the leader of the organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Curtis. Gosh, there's so much. It's like, okay, what do I need to go do right now? That's what I'm thinking. What do I need to go do next? But I want listeners to, get to know you a little bit more too. So we do a little bit of a fun lightning round at the end of each session. And so I'm just going to throw out some things and I want you to just tell us, who you are. So do you prefer the mountains or the beach?
Beach, because that's where my wife wants to be.
You're putting it out there.
I'm an active person. I always thought I was that guy who just wouldn't want to sit on the beach doing nothing all day. Apparently I can, Kristi. I can do it.
Awesome. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, period.
Netflix or like live theater?
Live theater for sure. We live in Cleveland, so we got the Playhouse Square, which is the largest theater district outside of New York City. People don't realize that. And so we got a lot of good shows coming through. We also got the Severance Hall, which is the Cleveland Orchestra, so you can see live music. So we've been doing all that. It's been so fun.
Awesome. I surprised my kids this morning as they were getting ready for school. I'm taking all of them. My husband's out of town, but I'm taking all of them to a concert tonight. For 2 of my 3 kids, it'll be their first concert. And like the look on their face and like the power of live music is just, it's going to be, I can't wait for the experience. It's going to be so awesome. Okay. And last one, cats or dogs?
We have a cat and a dog. I like how easy it is to take care of a cat. I like how a dog engages with me. So yeah, slight lean towards dog, I guess.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Curtis, I'm just so grateful that you shared your wisdom with me today. There's a lot I've learned just in our conversation, our previous conversation, and our conversation today. So I am also going to link your book in the show notes. So if anybody wants to read more, get more information, from that book, that's where you can find it, as well as where they can find you. So just really thankful that you were here today and open to kind of sharing your own personal journey as well as the journey of others. So I'm hopeful and confident that leaders that are listening in, or anybody for that matter, have found some inspiration in what they can go do next.
Well, I appreciate you having me on.
It was fantastic to hear Curtis share the story of himself in the CEO's office and being run over by someone he considered a friend. I mean, how many of us have found ourselves in similar situations at work, but have not been courageous enough to do something about it? Instead, we consider ourselves stuck. Well, Curtis shared his simple way to create a breakthrough and some incredible questions to begin asking yourself and others, like, if you were full of courage, what would you do? The key for me in all of this is it's time to cut out the distractions and be present so we can observe when we are stuck and then be one of the first to go and do something about it. Don't let the vibe be created for you. You can go first and begin to make the change to create impactful work vibes. Just go do it. Keep vibing, my friends. If this episode inspired you and you want to see how you can take the next step to creating a better vibe within your organization, I'd love for you to download our complimentary 75 Vibes worksheet. This is a simple tool to create a habit and mindset around creating great vibes in work and life. The best part, it's simple and it works.